Since the introduction of the National Cathedral project, it has been mired in a controversy after another that government has courted so much satisfaction in the quest to see the project through amid concerns of morality, usefulness, finance, and transparency and the dose of politics. With the issues being bandied around, the IMANI for Center Policy and Education recently released a policy document that looks at the National Cathedral project through a policy lens and identifies 10 challenges with the National Cathedral policy. To discuss content and reasoning behind this report, I have with me the founding president and chief executive officer of IMANI Center for Policy and Education, and you are watching The Hard Truth. My name is Nana Akusia Kunida Samuels. Franklin, welcome to The Hard Truth. How are you?
Pleasure to be here.
How's been your health? I mean, I heard you're not well. Are you better now?
Well, I take it one day at a time. I'm not so great, but I'm grateful to God.
What happened to you?
I just have some slight movement disorder, but yeah, but I'm managing.
But you look well. I'm glad you made it to the studio. Thank you so much,
you.
Franklin. Now, IMANI released recently a policy document titled The National Cathedral Through a Policy Lens, 10 Challenges with the Cathedral Policy. First of all, what did you hope to achieve with this document and from the posturing of government on this particular issue? What are you likely to get from this, and are they likely to listen to you? Is the government likely to listen to you?
Well, as you know, as a think tank, we sift through a number of ideas, if you like, and a number of issues whenever they crop up, so that at least we can provide some clarity, as we always do, through what we call the policy lens. So this piece was essentially, should I call it an amalgamation of thoughts collected from not necessarily around the world, but from many important sources, just to understand what, first of all, a cathedral is, what constitutes a cathedral, what really, in terms of the financing of cathedrals around the world, what the experience has been, and then bring to bear our own circumstance or circumstances surrounding the National Cathedral. Don't forget, our cathedral was said to have started as a privately thought idea. You know, our president dreamt and he thought that he had this covenant with God and wanted to necessarily give God the glory for making him president. There are many, I don't know of any cathedral in the world that started off from that particular premise. So this is a first for Ghana. You understand?
So it's not okay. I mean, isn't that okay for someone to say, I had a dream or I have a passion to do this for God? That's fine, right?
Oh, no, there's nothing wrong with dreaming. You know, when you have your personal dreams, you do not force the results of the dreams on the entirety of your family, or in this case, on the entirety of the country, and then move from that pedestal to ask people, taxpayers, to fund your dream.
Right,
that's actually the difference here.
Yes, but drawing from your document, it would seem that things started going wrong from the beginning of the word cathedral used in the name, or that represents the seat of, what's it called, the bishop in Ghana. But looking at it again, there is no national bishop in our country. Why would the government make a simple mistake like this?
So you're referring to the categorical confusion that we thought we should highlight, that calling it a national cathedral itself is a misnomer, because cathedrals, as we all know, are necessarily Orthodox-led in nature, right? I mean, the Catholics have cathedral. The cathedral is where a bishop actually resides. Ghana does not have a national bishop. So in the first place, to christen this enterprise as a national cathedral and then try to give it a legal name or give it legal persona, it's in itself a misnomer. So that's what we wanted to highlight, that there is nothing particularly official in terms of the categorization of cathedrals and the way cathedrals are operated or managed, that you can find in this particular.
So we need a
one.
national bishop to have a national cathedral, is what you're saying?
Well, that is what it could mean. I mean, if you recall that the army, for instance, there are certain schools, army, and then which one again? I mean, there are establishments that have chaplains or the chaplaincy. So maybe what we are looking at here is some sort of an entity that has the authority of a chaplaincy, or a chaplain being in charge. Anything that falls short of this
But I'm thinking,
description.
why would this escape anyone involved in this project? Could it be the case that, the name was chosen by the president and no one could say nothing otherwise?
Well, the difficulty for most of us is that, I mean, when it started, as we said, it was a private enterprise, right? Then somehow, because it's been suggested that the nation would own it under uh, very discording or discordant reasons that have been given as as a touristic destination, as a religious destination, those things were afterthoughts. So it makes it difficult for us to understand what exactly is the reasoning behind it being christened a national cathedral. As we said, it cannot be described as a national cathedral because we don't have a national bishop, to say the least, right?
But would government be willing to, change the name? Is it too late for government to do that, to
Well, this
rectify
is
it?
a policy document essentially suggesting that there are certain confusions around the whole concept. So we are not necessarily imposing or suggesting to government to change the name. I don't think they will probably even do that. But we just wanted to highlight the fact that christening in the National Cathedral is not in keeping with the times, or it's not in keeping with the established norms of a cathedral.
Now, your policy document questions the promised value to be delivered by the cathedral. The cathedral is expected to be home to Africa's first Bible museum and documentation center, which is supposed to attract a lot of tourists and visit. You, however, find the proposition flawed. Do you think government is, overly optimistic in their permutations?
Well, we just wondered what would motivate people to come and visit the National Cathedral. I mean, cathedrals all over the world have some uniqueness, really, to them, which would make people go and visit, right? I do not know the religious
Now, looking
significance.
at 60 million tourists,
Well, that's fanciful, as you described. That's almost 40-fold the tourists who go to religious destinations across the continent, right? So to think that you are going to have a 40-fold increase simply because you have a Bible museum um, in the cathedral is quite over optimistic, really, and like you said, it is quite fanciful. I don't know which permutations. Arithmetic permutations have been made to tap into the 60 million, or expect the 60 million people coming to visit, because you.
is it a year? Is it a whole? I mean, is it 60 million a year? What is the number?
Well, the idea is that, I mean, numbers are looked at annually, right? I mean, people
60
visit.
million tourists a year.
Yeah, yeah. So that's. I mean, all these things are just afterthoughts, and I think as we keep moving on, the story is not going to end. There are many parts of this story that we are still not served with, and so this particular one about the 60 million touristic potential for the cathedral is. I mean, it was just pulled out of thin air, really.
Imani asks a very critical question as to whether a 21st century cathedral with no history or spiritual pedigree can actually distinguish itself, given the large number of what's it called, cathedrals worldwide. Do you lack, or do you think they lack confidence in the cathedral competitiveness? You as a person, do you lack confidence in the cathedral competitiveness?
Well, it's not about lacking confidence. As I said, I mean, cathedrals all over the world have some spiritual significance, right? I mean, it's like visiting grottos. I'm a Catholic, by the way, and there are certain places in this part of the world where either cathedrals have been built, or we call them national grottos, simply because there's in some instances, Mary must have appeared in an apparition to some people, right? And then the place become known as a spiritual go-to center. Um, I do not think that the National Cathedral, and I'm sorry, I'm still calling it National Cathedral because everybody's calling National Cathedral. This cathedral that we want to build, unfortunately, would not have any religious significance. There's nothing.
Foundation stones from Israel. all these things, fancy things they bring in from you, doesn't have any spiritual significance to you?
Well, people visit Israel all the time. I'm not too sure that anybody who visits Israel would collect sand in Israel and then come and say that I stepped on sand in Israel, and because of that, the sand is spiritual and that it should be visited or should be, wherever the person keeps it, then it becomes a place, a holy site. These are configurations of some contorted thinking around spirituality. I'm not an ordained bishop, but I do think that collecting the stone from a geographic area and then using that as a basis for spiritual exercise is quite fanciful, really.
But again,
I don't know whether
thinking about it
every
right now,
stone in Israel
Franklin,
is blessed.
why can't we use our own stones? I'm thinking, I mean, of course, Israel is, yes, but what will happen
Which
if we
brings
use our
to
own
mind
stones
that
for
there
our
are many,
foundations?
many important places. Confanochi's, Confanochi is rumored to have, what's it called? What was it again about Confanochi?
Which one?
The,
But
the
he's a
spiritual.
traditional person. This is a Christian.
Yes,
This is like a
but,
spiritual thing.
but the place is heralded as one of the spiritual centers wherever he
But that would be a
performs.
conflicting something. I mean, that's
No, but
a
it's
clear
religious.
conflict
It's
here.
religious. I mean, religion is not just Christianity.
Christian
Don't
National
forget.
Cathedral. I mean, what are we talking
But
about
the
here?
point I'm making is that the places where Confanochi must have conjured the stool from, I mean, that particular place is more spiritual, has more significance than this national cathedral. Just as there are shrines in this country that would have many more people visiting than the national cathedral because there's significance. It's like going to the Cape Coast Castle because there's history there. There's thousands of years of history that has been recorded there. What history is this cathedral bringing to us? That the stone has been brought from Israel. Just because a stone has been carried from Israel, then it becomes a spiritual significance. It has spiritual significance. I don't think so, really.
We were told initially that the cathedral secretariat was to set up and to raise funds from individuals and the private sector for, for the construction. We are now facing a different narrative. Public funds are now being used. Again, do you think government lied from the word go?
Lie is a very strong word. I think they were being evasive and they've not been fair to us, really. And I find out that the president has been just too
Semantics,
stubborn.
they lied. Did they
Well,
lie?
well, you can say lie, especially when you're dealing with a religious item here. So let's go with your word lie. I think that they've been quite evasive, and you're right, they've lied. Essentially, that the cathedral was going to be erected based on personal or private funding. From the moment it moved to a national enterprise, as in using national fund, taxpayer fund to fund it, we were not necessarily told why that was supposed to be the case. And so that has been a big lie, and I yield to your terminology. I'm just being charitable because you see, the story about the cathedral is not ended. So there may be possible permissible lies, there may be inadmissible lies, and there may be just bare lies as we go on. So that's one of the problems with this cathedral project, because it looks as if the foundation upon which it's built itself has not been quite
But could it also be the case that the fundraising activities of the secretariat is, you didn't result prompting the government to personally get involved?
Yeah, but then it tells you
to ensure
about
things
building.
are done.
I think it's in the Bible that a man who wants to start a building or erect a building must be sure about the foundation. If the foundation is not solid, you can be sure that the building will come crumbling. That's quite akin to this cathedral. Everything, the conceptualization of the cathedral, in terms of funding, in terms of the propriety of it itself, has been quite wrong. That is how come the budget keeps changing from 100 million to 190 million to about 250 million to 300 million, 350 million, now to $400 million. When is it going to end? It is only because it has not been conceptualized properly, which is why we're having all these challenges with it. So don't be surprised if you hear the next time that the budget has ballooned to maybe $1 billion, simply because I don't think this project was thought through at all. And that's what happens sometimes with certain dreams, especially those induced by overeating.
You're still watching The Hard Truth. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You are still watching The Hard Truth. I have with me the founder and president of IMANI for Center and Education Policy. Franklin, you asked this very important question. I'm going to ask you the same question. Why isn't the Christian community, its philanthropic allies, and the faithful taking responsibility for building the cathedral, if indeed they are supportive as the government claims they are? I'm asking you the same question.
Well, again, these are foundational problems with the cathedral because the whole idea was that it's supposed to unite us, right? This is a place to unite us because of the kinds of ceremonies that will be held there. And primarily because it's Christian led, you assume that the Christian community will be interested in ensuring that it is seen to its completion or fruition. Unfortunately, we haven't had that particular, should I call it, concerting, coming together of ideas on the Christian community. I mean, presumably this should have been led by the Christian community itself, right? If it was really something that they thought was so unique. Maybe not, because there are about 40.
We have Opokoyina on the board.
There are about 40 traditional Orthodox cathedrals in this country, but there are about 120 sort of related buildings that look like cathedrals, right? So maybe that's why first of all, there isn't that particular edge in the first place. But secondly, you know, in Nigeria, for instance, when they were trying to build a civic worship center, they didn't call it a national cathedral. And don't forget, President Obasanjo was more or less a supportive treasurer of sorts.
Yeah.
He did not put a naira of Nigeria's funds into the building of that edifice. What he did was that he used his persona to appeal to private sector people to donate. And actually the church got involved, raised lots of money and put it together. I mean, you expect that if this was really the purpose or the intention, the Christian community here should have been much happier to contribute to this edifice. But I don't think we are getting that type of vibe. I mean, you are talking about people on the board, right? What gravitas do they have to draw or raise financial resources to get the project going? Already there have been certain attempts like visiting the Bible Museum in the United States and all of that, hoping that the museum would help the cathedral project come to fruition because they're expecting that the Bible Museum in the United States was going to help them raise money. Unfortunately, nothing has come true. But that museum itself has its own challenges in the state, right? So that's why I say that this whole enterprise was not thought through properly.
But Otabo resigned. Reverend Otabo, Pastor Otabo resigned.
Well, the Secretariat claims he did not resign and that he has never been part of the board in the first place. Well, he likes to keep silent. By the way, he's also building a huge edifice, which could pass for a cathedral, by the way. And I think he gave us a tour, I remember, not long ago. And we're quite happy to see the type of investment that has been made there. So he's probably happy dealing with his own cathedral than coming to join a cathedral that has no head and tail, really.
Let's look at issues of accountability or transparency, I would say. Issues of transparency has come to the fore because public funds in the millions of cedis have been pumped into the project so far. This is captured under the financial opacity in your document. Why do you think government is so cagey about the cathedral's finances?
Well, primarily because, again, the conceptual design and architectural designs were, if you like, I won't say the architectural designs were flawed, but the concept of the cathedral itself was very flawed to start with. So because the foundational basis of the cathedral is fraught with a lot of inconsistencies and, if you like, unknown concepts and unknown sources of funding here and there, actually that should have been the impetus to make sure that if the public was going to be asked to support it, the public should know everything about the project, right? But we've been kept in the dark. We only got to know recently that hundreds of millions of Ghana cedis has been siphoned into this project from the taxpayer fund. And we do not even know the final figure. So our description of financial opacity is to the extent that, first of all, you did not even tell us that you were going to make this a national project, to the extent that you started using our funds without telling us, and you've not told us exactly what the whole enterprise is actually going to cost and what amount, what
So like you
percentage.
said, from 100 to 180
Exactly, what
to
percentage?
300 to 400. So what do you think could lead to, to this? Because, and do you think they are going to account for it upwardly, looking at the trends of the cathedral?
Well, they will have to account for it one way or the other, because if public funds had been used, as is the case, and we still do not know when it will end, then we need to know, we need to be in the know as to how much of the money has been spent, how much of taxpayer money has been spent on this project, and how much more will be spent on it. But keeping us in the dark is actually the wrong thing to do.
When it comes to this project, frankly, I've been thinking it seems government is just doing whatever it pleases when it comes to the cathedral project. Government is doing whatever it's pleased without recourse to the law. IMANI argues that government has been showing disregard for the law. How damaging is this to the government?
Well, it's damaging to the extent that this is a government that told us that they were going to protect the public purse. And if it is the case that the procurement process leading to this project itself was fraught with a lot of inconsistencies, was fraught with irregularities, as in sole sourcing the entire architectural designs to one person, in itself means that we've not been served properly. And after the procurement has been done, we also do not know. In fact, Parliament had to be basically asking for these details. And the finance minister has not gone to Parliament to tell Parliament exactly how much of our money has been spent on the cathedral project so far. That we feel is disregard for the law, and among other laws that would also be disregarded. I find the whole transition of a private enterprise into a now national asset being foisted on us as quite wrong. We should have been asked whether we wanted to fund
yes,
the
the
project.
government has failed to disclose a full set of financial commitment, disbursements, and liabilities to Parliament, despite several budget cycles since
Exactly.
project commencement. Now, do you believe that this reflects on the form of corruption and some underhand spending? Does it reflect on that?
Well, it's borderline, really. I mean, if you spend without letting the person who pays gets to know, it means you're actually using some ulterior processes to siphon money into a project that otherwise the person has not sanctioned. Don't forget, we taxpayers have to be in the know. Anytime our funds is being spent, our funds are being spent on any project at all. So to the extent that we did not know, and we still do not know how this cathedral is being funded, at least on the taxpayer pool, it begs the question, really, whether we shouldn't call it corruption or just, should I say, borderline thievery.
Imani also argues that actions and duties reserved for the board of directors of this cathedral, have been appropriated by the presidency.
Yeah, simply because the
How
project.
serious is this? And, how and why did they get away with this? I'm just thinking, how did they get away
Well,
with this?
what it essentially means is that, you see, our presidency is very powerful. The constitution has made the presidency a very powerful enterprise, institution, rather. So what happens is that if the presidency wants to appropriate certain functions of otherwise a nationally sanctioned entity like a ministry, all it needs to do is to say that particular institution is not subsumed under the presidency. So this cathedral project is being directed and supported from the presidency, that essentially the office of government machinery. Meanwhile, there's a secretariat or there's a board that has been set up that is supposed to manage the affairs of the cathedral. If it was the case that the project was that important, that the board should be put in place to manage its affairs, to look for money, to spend, we do not think it is right for the office of the presidency to superintend this project by having an office that, especially a spending office located within the presidency. There are just too many important things at the presidency for the presidency to be seen spending money or directing spending and, if you like,
So what's the implication, and how can we check the government in future? What's the implication
Well,
of
the
this?
implications are that if this funding is subsumed under the presidency, it gets very difficult to audit because they can come up with any reason to suggest that, well, we spend it because of certain contingency plans or national security purposes. And that can be wished away without necessarily us getting to know all the details and then getting, should I say, accountability for the spending.
I have a lot of people who said somewhere or the other they have paid, or one way or the other, they have paid some monies or they have contributed to the National Cathedral and they want their monies back. What would you tell such persons?
Well, it depends on the reasons why they want it back. Is it because now they see that the cathedral is a foundation or it's an epitome of lies, confusion, and if you like, outright chicanery? Well, they should go and ask it back because they freely gave, really. I don't know whether the cathedral people will be willing to give the money back. I don't know through what means they donated, whether they did Momo transactions.
For someone who is considering, I want to contribute to this cathedral, what would be your advice to them? Do you think it's a good project for people to, especially Christians, to
Well, if they have
pump
the
in
money and they think it is a wise enterprise, they should. We can't force people not to, but certainly not the state money. We don't think the state should be using funding meager resources to fund an enterprise which has no significance, which has no uniqueness, which has nothing close to being described as a cathedral that we all know exists around the world.
We'll be right back to stay. Welcome back. You are still watching The Hard Truth. Franklin Cudjoe is the founding president and CEO of IMANI Center for Policy and Education. Franklin, really, let's just get into the architecture. David Ajayi is the man, in the middle of this, and he was awarded a contract via sole sourcing. You said that earlier, despite the clear conditions and threshold laid out in the procurement laws for sole sourcing were not met. He was paid $6 million, even before a basic alignment between the architect and the builders. Ajayi is known for his affiliations with persons closely related to our First Lady. Do you think this is a clear case of favoritism?
Well, we throw it out there because we think that the only reason why Sir David Ajayi could have gotten this contract on a sole source basis because there could be obviously conflict of interest. I mean, his relations with the first family is quite well known. At this juncture, we are making deductions, right? Because David Ajayi is not known to be receiving sole source contracts across the world. In fact, in almost all his projects, he's won them based on competitions, right? Procurement that is done in a very transparent manner. And he's happy to have won. And we are happy for him, for his intellect. I mean, there's a certain sense that people think that we are trying to pull him down, and that is a Ghanaian syndrome.
No, but let's take the issues one by one.
No,
6 million,
the point I
without
want to make is that,
going through anything.
Exactly. You see, the point we want to make is that nobody has any interest in pulling anybody down. The point we are essentially saying is that in other jurisdictions where he's won contracts, he's won them fairly because they were competitively organized. And he's happy, and we are happy for him. How in his own home country, all these issues, all these processes are sidestepped and just given to him on a silver platter It's quite confounding. And our estimation is that our deduction is simple. Now you can only get that not because of your superior intellect, but on the African continent by how close you are to to the powers that be. And in this case, we find the relationship between himself and the first family um, a possible reason, a probable reason for these particular occurrence. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense really.
But let's go back a little from your
And if you
from
thought
your
that is one other ones solely based on so sourcing purposes.
But Franklin, you said earlier, we all know that the president said it was his personal project, personal thing he wanted to do for God. So couldn't he have been the
Did God
case
also
where,
reveal the architects to him?
well, so if it's my personal preference and I choose whoever I want to build for me,
Well,
don't
as
you
long
think?
as state funds are involved, then the picture changes. Because our financial laws are clear. Once you want to use state resources to do something of this nature, it must be competitively, it must respect the public financial management tools that we have. Unfortunately, it cannot be wished away. Even if it was a privately funded project, you'd be interested in making sure that the best designs win the bid, right? And there
Yeah.
have been many privately funded architectural establishments or designs or constructions that Sir David Ajay has done, and he won them fairly through competition.
So from where you sit, is there a strong basis for prosecutions to take place regarding how the contract was awarded?
Well, I mean, if there are clear violations of the procurement law. There are clear violations as to how much money he's supposed to have been paid up front. Don't forget, he's been paid up front of almost $6 million, which is quite almost like 4 times what he would have received in the UK if he had won this project in the UK. So there are people who have to answer questions. I think the finance ministry has to answer questions as to why it was using our
But
money
it looks
on our
like
blind
so.
side.
Let's look at this. Imani also argues that the sudden single sourcing of contracts to David Ajayi since 2018 raised serious concerns. He was awarded project including Ghana Trade Fair Center, Agenda 111, then the Web Du Bois Museum Complex, New Bank of Ghana Complex, and then GNPC Complex. So clearly, it's not like his first time. He's been having a lot of soul sourcing
Yeah, but that's the
projects.
point. If our laws on procurement are supposed to be sole source, let's say so. But let's not have sole sourcing and have, what should I call it, competitive based tendering as part of the public procurement processes. The fact of the matter is that sole sourcing the argument we are making essentially is that you cannot sole source architectural designs. It is just not done. It is so wrong. That's the point we are making.
Government is obviously burning the goodwill for the National Cathedral project, and Imani concluded that this has, damaged the prospect of raising large private donations. How can government mitigate this?
Well, you asked a question a while back. What was my advice to people who are contemplating withdrawing their support to the National Cathedral? It's symptomatic, really. It's an indicator that this project going forward is going to face a lot of challenges when it comes to raising capital for it, especially because of the nature of the financial permutations that are being made. Do you know how much the project will cost? You don't know. It started off 100 million, as I said, 190, 250, 300, 350, now 400 million. Nobody knows when it's going to end. Would you want to put your money in such an enterprise? I think they're going to have a lot of challenges raising the money, and which is why we should now find out exactly how much of the state funding had been appropriated for this purpose and actually find a way of stopping it as well. Because we do not think it is right for us to be kept in the dark as to what percentage the state is supposed to contribute to this project and as to what the private sector is supposed to contribute to it.
Again, your analysts concluded that the only viable segment of the National Cathedral project within 2024 timeframe is the the auditorium aspect. Why is that, and what would that make the time frame change?
Well, I mean, clearly there are project constraints. I mean, from budgeting, raising raising funding for the project has become a challenge. Don't forget, workers laid their tools for almost 3 months, and some of them have not been paid. So those are the signs, and there's a lot of confusion that is going to brew between the architects and the builders as well, because once there's when there's a challenge raising money for the project, what it means is that it's going to stall the entire project. So we estimate that at most, the only part of the cathedral that can be concluded will be the auditorium. And that is even being optimistic. That's if they are even able to raise the money.
So again, you also said that if President Akufo-Addo continues to stick stubbornly to the original, objective, grandiose objective of this project, the project is likely to stall much longer. But from the posturing of the president, do you see him changing his stance?
Well, I mean, if you don't have the means to conclude a grandiose project such as this, then you'll be forced to change your stand. We do not know where the money is going to come from. I don't know of any private enterprise or private foundation that will be willing to continuously fund this project. But the project has no head and tail, really. I mean, when it comes to financing.
So what do you expect? What should his stance be? The president's
Maybe you
stance?
should refocus, minimize have a project redesigned and a much smaller civic center, national civic or worship center built, rather than this grandiose project. Because I don't think, given the trajectory of events that have occurred with this project, they are going to raise the necessary funding within the time frame that they hope to do that, because they want to finish it by 2024. It's not going to happen. And I think the president can only backtrack or will backtrack simply because funding for this project, as a stalling, cannot be revived by 2024 to complete the entire project. At best, the president should ensure that there must be a revision of the designs and then have a much smaller entity built that may become something useful for the legacy he wants to leave.
Do we even need a national cathedral? Is it necessary?
Well, if you ask me, we don't need a cathedral. I mean, there's nothing. I don't think. Again, the point about priorities is quite frankly ludicrous, really. I mean, I think it is important to make the point that in this time when we have clear challenges economically, it's actually quite stupid to be spending lots of taxpayer funding, sources of money to complete or to inject into this fanciful project, really.
Assuming a different government comes to power in 2024, what do you think will be the fate of the National Cathedral project?
Even if it is an MPP government, I'm not sure they will continue the project.
Why?
Yeah, because public uproar and public disdain for the project has reached the highest heavens, really. And if it's opposition, well, it will be bidded farewell entirely. I think it will become one of those white elephants, and maybe auctioned off to somebody who needs it for something probably different. But don't forget, we've spent so much money, state funding, state lands, and it's just inconceivably silly to have thought about this idea, really. I mean, of all the things that I thought the president would think about as his legacy, this was certainly not one of them.
Frankly, you were very optimistic, before the election that, you brought out a policy, said this government, looking at the things that you brought at the time, this government was going to be, I would say, a better option or, an option for Ghanaians to consider. What's your stand on the state of the economy right now?
Well, I was optimistic, but I was also a bit measured, because knowing politicians, I thought that if politicians were an enterprise, it would be illegal to sell the enterprise. So I've always had it at the back of my mind that there may be some surprises there, but I never thought that the level of surprise would surprise me myself. So I'm a bit. I'm quite ambivalent right now to be believing in the entire Ghana project when it comes to politicians.
Did Ghanaians make a mistake in bringing Addo and his government into power? Did you make a mistake?
Well, Ghanaians have to make that particular call.
I'm asking you.
I certainly think that there were certain aspects of governance, certain aspects of economic governance that they could have gotten way, way, way much better. There are
Like
certain
what? Yeah.
decisions that the president took that has gotten us into this black hole of sorts. I mean, what was the sense in creating additional regions? Regions that have no economic value, but rather drawing a lot more from them. It looks as if the president has a penchant for grandiose things that are wasteful but has no added value to the economy, right? Look at the creation of the ministries, the number of ministries that were created, the number of ministers. A ministry like the Ministry for Special Development Initiative was just one wasteful enterprise shepherded at the presidency for the same purpose and for the same reasons as the Cathedral project has been shepherded there. Just billowing funds without adding any significant value. So I feel pain that and I do really admire the president, by the way, because I thought and I think that he still has that verve as a politician. But I think most of his decisions, unfortunately, make us.
Do you think we have a listening president? Does he listen at all? Does he listen?
Well, he listens, but he doesn't hear.
What does that mean?
What it means is that he only, of course, he listens, he understands what is being said, but as to whether he hears it properly in order to practicalize them, I don't think he does so.
So I'm asking again, did we make a mistake? Did Ghana make a mistake in bringing in the NPP government?
Speaking for myself, I think we made a mistake in certain aspects of the presidency. Again, you cannot tell really. So you can't necessarily say that the whole election of the president was a mistake. You can't say so because you didn't know at the time. But now you've seen that there are certain clear decisions that you did not expect the president to take, and some of them he's taking that is quite confounding, really. So on that score, yes, we can say that we made certain mistakes.
They wouldn't spend. They were going to, take care of a budget and all, but now it's like it's gone haywire.
No, you're totally right. I mean, if you thought that the public reckless spending has gone forth almost quadrupled, if not actually fivefold. It's grown fivefold since the last time Mohammed was in power. That certainly is something that we should get worried about. I mean, the debt levels have shot beyond the roof. Again, certain decisions that were taken in terms of personnel and dicing up the country and then wasting resources. I really did not think that the president should have done that. And he had a lot of goodwill, which unfortunately has now been spent.
So do you think e-levy is going to fix anything as they're claiming?
Well, e-levy cannot. E-levy is going to bring in, they expected 600 million. They are making barely 60 million in the first month of the e-levy. We had warned that the e-levy the rate should be revised from, at least if we're going to collect at all, start from 0.5%. Of course, they were stubborn and they did not listen. And now it's clear that out of, they're doing barely 10% of what is expected.
So e-levy won't help the economy?
I mean, I did not know how people believed that e-levy was going to fix everything in the economy. It was just fanciful. To think that what has come in is even less than the amount of money received through road tolls that were abandoned tells you that you have put the cart before the horse.
If you are to conduct an election now, what will be the fate of the NPP government?
I really cannot say, except to rely on one poll. There's a question we asked.
But you are very good at that. I mean, before an election, you do your polls, and it's been 18 months.
There's a question
they've been in power. So I'm asking you.
Well, I guess the question can be flipped.
That's
a direct question, by the way. The question can be flipped, which was what we asked in our e-levy survey recently, by the way, but we did not publish that because we thought that was not the basis for the e-levy survey. But we threw it in there, and we found out that at least about almost 89% of Ghanaians are not happy with the direction of the economy. If that's translated the way things are being managed, they are not happy. So if that gets flipped again, and then the question is asked in the very words that you choose, this government will fall if the elections were held today.
Do we need an NDC MPP government? Do you think it's time we move on to something else? I mean, do we need a Lee Kuan Yew in Ghana?
Well, I guess what we need, beside a Lee Kuan Yew, is that we need to have honesty in public office. It's very important. We need to have pragmatic leaders, and we need to believe in meritocracy. I think these are the soft issues that will change the fortunes of this country. I do not think changing political officers in and out necessarily will change the fortunes of this country.
But we have a duopoly, NDC and PP. This is what we have.
Yes,
Do
but I'm
we
saying
break?
that until we
So in,
imbibe the Singaporean model of the MPH, meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty in public office, I don't think we'll fix this
do you
country.
see that happening anytime soon? Having all these, characteristics of a good government and governance.
Unfortunately, not.
So what will happen to us if we don't get something like that?
I guess everybody should be interested in the matters of affairs, public affairs, and wherever he or she finds himself or herself must act responsibly and make sure that the state functions collectively as a body politic that we cannot be proud of.
What is wrong with our politics now in Ghana?
Our politics is too expensive. Our politics is almost sold to the highest bidder. Our politics is high octane, it's full of spin, propaganda, and has little light.
I've heard them say, we're waiting for the NDC government, or we're waiting for President Mahama. What would you tell such persons? Do you think President Mahama will do the magic for Ghana in 2025?
Well, a President Mahama government must ensure, if it wins power, that the basic levels of pragmatism, meritocracy, and honesty in public office, which have all become rare commodities, are imbibed. That would be the only basis of which you succeed.
But have they learned their lesson? Do you think they've learned their lessons?
Unfortunately, we are stuck with the two. It's only a fool that doesn't change his or her mind. And so if the NDC wins power, I think it will be foolhardy on their part to repeat some of the things they did in the past, and actually to repeat a third or a quarter of what this government has done. I think this government had actually whitewashed the NDC by the kinds of things they've supervised and superintended upon us.
So do we need a Mahama government?
That's a question for the voters, by the way. It's not a question for me.
You're a voter.
Well, I've not voted in the last 3 or 4 elections, and it's a good reason. I mean, I just think that the options on the table, I'm not entirely too pleased with them, and also my personal.
Entirely pleased with who?
With the politics of the country, really. That's what I'm saying. I'm not taking for high octane politics. I'm not taking for propaganda politics. I'm not taking for what I call sloganeering politics. It's all slogan. That's all you hear. One this, one that, free this, free that, with little light. I mean, has anybody done a proper estimation of the value of education in the next 10 years? It's not the free we are getting today, but the value of addition to the economy in the next 10 years. That's the way we measure policy at IMANI.
I see. So finally, do you think the finance minister, should he be sacked? Should the finance minister be sacked?
I think there must have been a little change in the finance ministry, especially if you wanted investor confidence in this country, across the world. Because as I speak, and look at the reports of the rating agencies, quite a lot. I mean, all those who are creditors are worried about about the trajectory of the economy, and so at the least, I expected there should have been some shake-up at the finance ministry, at least. In fact, there should have been some total overhauling of the presidency of Nana Addo in terms of the ministers that he has. He's never done any significant reshuffle in the last 5 to 6 years. That is not a good thing.
Really? Don't you think he has confidence in the
No, because he's made it easy for ministers to be settled in their positions and not necessarily do quite a lot.
Right. Thank you so much for talking to that. Oh my goodness. I've been speaking to Franklin Cudjoe, the founding president and chief executive officer of IMANI Center for Policy and Education. Really, what are your thoughts on the National Cathedral? How much are you willing to pay for this project? Share your thoughts with us on our social media platforms, and that is on your screen right now. And you've been watching The Hard Truth. My name is Nana. Akuzdiakonida Santi Samuels. Thank you so much for your time. Catch a repeat of the program on Saturday at 2 p.m. Have a good evening.